Our hot seat segment tonight, an undergraduate researcher at the University of Wisconsin-Madison is receiving national acclaim for her research saying teachers should allow Ebonics in the classroom. The idea behind the research is that English grammar is too hard for minorities to learn. Instead, teachers should allow the use of vernacular known as Ebonics so as not to hurt their feelings. With me now, contributor in education for the Daily Caller, Rob Shimshock, and Democratic strategist Avery Jaffe. Avery, Rob, thanks for being here.
Good to be here.
Thanks so much.
All right, Avery, let me turn to you first. This story, I think it's so absurd, it's almost funny here, but isn't this insulting to minorities?
Well, Liz, it's good to be a part of such a diverse panel for this topic. Let me say right off the bat, it's important for me that voices of color are included in this, and for as best as I can, I'll make the case. Look, I think that this was shocking to learn that free speech, once again, is under attack at a college campus. But this time, it's conservatives who are attacking free speech. Ebonics is a dialect, a vernacular that African Americans in the United States use. It's part of group identity. It gives structure to groups on campus. This student wants to create a more respectful campus environment. Good for her.
Right, but Rob, let me turn to you. I mean, it's not proper grammar. No one's saying that people can't speak like that. You can speak however you want, whatever dialect, whatever accent, whatever grammatical structure you so choose. But in college papers, I mean, grammar's grammar.
Right, and really what I'm coming at it from is more of a vocational perspective. I know that as an English major, but then also any working professional, I'm sure, is familiar with the deluge of emails, phone calls, conferences you partake in every day. And I think that when you start to normalize things like Ebonics, what ends up happening for any company is time that would have otherwise been spent maximizing profit or collaborating with your coworkers on projects ends up simply being used to try and understand the people with whom you're working. And very unfortunately for employers, they care about their bottom line, so they're going to hire people who can communicate with the rest of their workforce.
Right, that's an interesting perspective. I hadn't thought about it like that exactly. Avery, let me take it to an extreme here, but sometimes you have to take it to an extreme in order to unwrap how ridiculous something is. If there's not a standard of English grammar in papers, if you can write whatever way you want, use whatever kind of grammar you want, why even go to school then? Aren't you there to learn that kind of stuff?
Well, first off, I don't know what Rob is talking about as far as time to employers creating a good bottom line. We're talking about a research proposal by an undergraduate at the University of Wisconsin at Madison. This is not an edict that's coming to determine the way that companies run their business. To your question, however, talking about standards that are created, these are smart kids. These are smart kids who already have been admitted to a premier public institution of higher education. The University of Wisconsin-Madison is a fantastic program. It was even better before Scott Walker cut $200 million from it, but that's beside the point. These kids have been admitted to a top-tier public institution following the rules. This is simply a suggestion to professors to be more respectful and understanding of these students who may be coming from disadvantaged communities, who may have not had the same opportunities as other ones. And
right, but let me interrupt just for a second, because that's what I was talking about at the beginning. That's my first reaction to this story was that it was insulting to these students. Like you said, they're smart enough to get into college. I mean, maybe they're not smart enough to use proper grammar here, but isn't that an insult to their intelligence to say, because you came from a certain background, because you like to speak a certain way in your private life, or you and your friends have a certain way that you like to speak to each other, it's too difficult for you to feel included to use proper grammar? I mean, call me crazy, but Rob, that is ridiculous.
Right, I would find it incredibly patronizing. And you look at other groups that are in America, immigrant populations, they all try to, to the best of their ability, improve their English. And so I think it's definitely condescending to kind of try to push this, to try to push Ebonics as an accepted form of English.
But Rob, if I may interrupt, what's the most patronizing part about this is a community like ours, two white men, talking about this issue and being offended on behalf of African Americans or whichever population.
We're just talking about proper grammar. Are we not allowed to talk about proper grammar because we're white?
Well, of course we can talk about proper grammar, but are we really going to get into a big fuss about determining the ways that people speak? I mean, this is an attack on free speech, like you always talk about on your show. And now, just because that this group of students is African American, it's a problem. It's not as if this student is making these accusations, doing this research on her own without input from an African American group. She did the work. this student sat down with student leaders on campus and asked them, do you feel as though you can't, fulfill your potential by having to code switch in these classes?
But don't you think the students would have answered the same way if they were asked by a researcher? Do you feel that, do you feel marginalized or, excluded for something because you have to do your calculus homework? Obviously, they're going to answer the same thing if they have the option of not doing their homework, not learning the correct way to do it. If we're going to teach in college, on college campuses that identity or how you feel is the correct answer, when sometimes grammar is just grammar, sometimes a math problem is just a math problem. There's no racial element involved. Isn't that dumbing down learning and targeting minorities by doing that?
No, these students are already doing the work. This is an accommodation like could be provided in any Title IX accommodation. Again, this is not an edict. This is a proposal. These students are already doing the work. They've already done a great job to get into such an institution. And this is a series of important questions that are being asked on a college campus and that researchers across the country are now getting to look at because this particular research is getting a lot of national attention.
All right, Rob, we're almost out of time. Last word to you.
Right, if you look actually what the undergraduate researcher wants to do is establish a kind of nonprofit group that encourages teachers to be more accepting of different forms of English. And so I would think that these groups would have an impact on the conversation and would perhaps lead students to have unfair expectations of the workforce after they graduate.
Right, and one more point I would make just before we wrap this up is I don't think it's an attack on free speech because no one's trying to prevent these students from speaking in this way or from embracing if they consider that to be their culture. No one's trying to stop them from doing that on campus. They're just saying you have to use proper grammar when you're writing a paper. We all learned how to do that. That's not too much to ask anybody if you're intelligent enough to be in college. Avery, Rob, thanks for being here today.